I am so excited to have Annette with us today for our interview, and she is going to be presenting on how to move through feeling stuck with your emotions, particularly perhaps as we go through different life stages, and we might just get into all sorts of things as we chat. Annette, I have been really blessed to have known Annette for several years, and she comes to her role currently with a wealth of experience and just a really unique perspective with what she does now. So I won't steal her thunder. I'm going to let her kind of tell us a little bit more about what she does now and where she's come from, if that's okay.
Sounds good. I'm going to reverse it. I'm going to go with where I came from and what I do now.
Okay.
So I originally got my degree in elementary education with an emphasis in early childhood special education and reading. And then I spent 10 years as a teacher and then transitioned into an administrative role and was a principal for 5 years. And during that 15 years, just saw a lot of changes in kids, changes in families, and noticed a need, especially as a principal, for mental health supports. So we've worked a lot on getting that into the school system at the school that I was at the time, and just continued to see that need out there and got very interested in mental health, seeing it impact kids, seeing it impact parents, seeing it impact community, and even the teachers on my staff and myself. So decided after a lot of thoughtful prayer and consideration to shift to the mental health side. So I got a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling and started an internship with Journey Counseling Services in 2022. Finished that in early 2023 and have been licensed since 2023 as a clinical mental health counselor.
Awesome, amazing. So you came from teacher to principal to integrating a little bit of mental health plus maybe some trauma kind of in with the teacher realm and as a principal, which led you into that more of that mental health category.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's shift gears for a moment to kind of the topic of what we'll chat about today. I think feeling stuck with your emotions is something that we can all relate to, regardless of our age. Kids, teens, adults. Let's just first say what we mean by feeling stuck with emotions, because I think that makes sense to you and I.
Mm-hmm.
But what are a couple examples perhaps of what you see day to day that would exemplify stuck with your emotions?
Being stuck with our emotions, it is complicated and it looks really different for everybody, but kind of those excessive moments where we've had an emotion and maybe we felt like we've been there too long, like this should be over. Why am I still here? We tend to kind of put time frames on emotions, or we want to rush through them. And when we try to rush or either try to push them down, then they just get stuck and we feel like we're not moving anywhere. So that could happen over a long period of time, especially if we've kind of stuffed our emotions away or tried to invalidate them for a long period of time, and eventually something happens that brings it up and we don't know what to do with it and then we feel stuck. Or it could just be something that's lasted a really long period of time and you just don't feel like you can make any more progress on it and you just feel stuck.
So how does that manifest? Like, how would I know if I'm stuck with emotions? What are some things that might cue me in to say, oh, I've got some stuck emotions. I need to work with somebody to help me move through these. What are some of the things, signs and symptoms that might give us that impression?
Mm-hmm. It can start in a lot of different ways. Simply even just noticing, like, I feel different, I'm acting different, not enjoying normal day-to-day activities or even trying to get away from them. Like, I don't want to do that thing that I usually like to do, those hobbies, those daily routines. Even interacting or withdrawing from people you normally like to interact with can be signs that something isn't quite right. Being stuck too can also just be getting to a point of feeling numb about something. Like, I'm trying to work through this thing, but I just can't get anywhere. So now I'm just numb and I'm completely detaching from it. Like, I don't want to go there. I don't want to deal with it. And then we just move away from all forms of support completely.
Do you think then that it can impact close relationships, people around us too.
Yes, yeah. Sometimes it causes us to push away from people that we would normally draw closer to, or even just seek out other people to try and connect with, to just have a new connection that doesn't know what's going on in our life. And even in other ways too, can impact our physical health as well. So it can impact our eating habits, our exercise habits, even can cause pain issues or stomach issues. So we can also have physical symptoms that emotions are stuck and aren't being expressed in the way that they need to.
Yeah, so that kind of leads me into the next question. Why does it even matter if we are stuck with our emotions, right? Mm-hmm. Why do we want to do something about this if we notice that this is happening? And I know as a chronic pain specialist in the physical therapy realm, oftentimes I'll see this manifest long-term in those physical symptoms of a lot of stomach upset issues or physical pain. The body doesn't know what to do with these stuck emotions, and it's almost like then we start to see these play out in the form of dis-ease or pain, not feeling like yourself, things like that. How about in terms of addiction, I guess different mental health representations of this long term? What could this look like?
Sure. So people always try to cope with something, and that could be a healthy something or an unhealthy something. So you mentioned addictions. Some people turn to a substance as a form of coping. So whether that's alcohol, drugs, or even food, and even to the extent of exercise. People can cope in a lot of different ways, and any coping strategy, good or bad, even if it's good, it can become bad. So on the exercise realm, people can over-exercise because they're just trying to get away or feel or get that emotion through their body. So I'm gonna throw everything I have into exercise, or I'm gonna just numb everything by eating food or the alcohol, the drugs, whatever it is. So we can definitely use things that we think help us feel better as a coping strategy, but they can definitely be overused or in some cases are just not healthy to begin with. So when we don't know what to do with an emotion or the feelings that are stuck in our body, it is common for people to notice like, wow, I'm doing these things that I don't normally do, or maybe I'm doing things to excess that I haven't done in the past. And it's a matter of getting curious about why is that happening.
Okay, that makes sense. And this whole conversation makes me think a little bit in my own life. There came a point where I started noticing my blood pressure was rising. I started becoming much more hypervigilant, jumpy. And in hindsight, I don't think I recognized that at the time, but in hindsight then I realized there was a lot of stuck emotion that needed to be dealt with. And really that started calm once I started dealing with that improved my overall physical health, but then also those coping strategies, whether it was over exercising or snacking on foods that I didn't need to snack on, just because I was trying to numb things. And I think probably we've all tried, we can all relate to some degree. I feel like we all have some sort of addiction, whether it's to our phones or whether it's substance abuse or whatever that might be. And a lot of that relates to those stuck emotions, and also how our neurotransmitters, dopamine, a lot of stuff internally, the physiology that goes with that, which is all pretty fascinating. So let's say we have somebody who's feeling that. How do they get to see you? How do we make that transition from I've got some issues I need to deal with to I need to see Annette at Journey Counseling Services?
So you pick up the phone and you give us a call,
okay,
or send an email to our office. I strongly encourage people at any stage of the game. I think counseling is great at any point in your life. You don't have to wait until you feel stuck. If there's a lot of things going on in your life, mental health counseling is a great thing to have, both for a neutral place to just share what's going on in your life, but also to gain healthier coping strategies, or even if your coping strategies are healthy, just getting a wider range of them. I've noticed in my own life, sometimes the coping strategies that worked before don't work anymore, or they just don't fit my lifestyle anymore. So having a wide range of coping strategies to go to is really, really helpful. So yeah, reaching out, calling by phone or email to our office staff and just expressing your interest. You can also go on our website even just to look through. There's multiple counselors at Journey, and we all just have different backgrounds and different specialties that we are interested in. So I may not be the right counselor for you, but we definitely have a wide range of people that could definitely meet everybody's needs.
Yeah, I love how you said that, because certainly sometimes I think I run into people who have been in counseling and they just can't quite find that connection with their counselor. And I think it's important to give them people permission to maybe reach out to a different person, and one that you can find that connection with. And it doesn't mean that the person you're with is doing anything wrong, but maybe it's just a better connection with another person. So I love how you said that. The other thing you mentioned that jumped out at me was you said one coping strategy you may have had no longer works.
Mm-hmm.
So let's tie that into different phases of our life or transitions of life a little bit. Tell us more about that.
Yes. So as we all know, life is ever changing and there's always something happening, whether that's literal life stages of, high school going into college going into adulthood and getting married and having kids, and the kids going up in age and getting out of the house and becoming an empty nester. Those are all like big life transitions that we think of, but there's even small ones that are happening constantly all the time. So getting laid off from a job, getting a new job, even just your kids progressing each year in school, our family aging and changing, friendships are always changing. People move away, people move into life, you change churches. There's always something happening that's a life transition, and with every one of those transitions there comes emotions with that. Every transition has some element of loss within it, which is associated with grief. And I think I've noticed a lot in the work I've done so far as a counselor, that those transitions hold a lot more power than we think they do, because we don't think of them as grief. We don't think of like, oh yeah, my friend moved away, as grief, because you're still kind of connected with them, more than, especially in the world of technology, right? We are still connected, but we're not seeing them, and that relationship has changed and it looks different. It's okay to grieve that and have emotions around that. But what happens is when we don't really look at those with and acknowledge the emotions that they hold, they kind of just pile up over time. And then something happens that finally like gets us kind of to our breaking point where we're like, oh my gosh, I've got all of this stored up. What is happening? And I have people come in a lot and they're like, there's so many emotions, I don't know what's happening. And we start talking through their story and they're just listing all of these different things. And I'm like, well, that's a lot of life transition. And it might be small stuff, but it all adds up, it all makes a difference. And we have to be able to own those things as like, yes, there are things that happen, life changes, there's always something going on, but all of those things have emotions attached to them, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's powerful. In our culture that we're in does not, we're all so busy, right? So we don't have that culture that necessarily says it's okay to make space for that. So that actually reminds me, I did not grow up in the United States. I grew up in a third world culture. And one thing, when you said grief, I hadn't made this connection before, but in that culture, if a relative or a friend or somebody died or passed away, they would actually have a ceremony of grief where they would wail and sing in their traditional languages for up to 3 days as part of that tradition. And that was a set tradition, a grieving tradition. And not that we need to wail and grieve for 3 days during every life transition, because it'd be hard to get things done. But I think that finding the space to just sit back with those emotions of transition, if it's not in that moment, then giving yourself time, because sometimes in the moment we can't see it, right?
Right.
Absolutely. So maybe after that moment, whenever we can find that time and that space to sit with those emotions, maybe with a counselor, that's powerful.
Yes, because oftentimes a lot of people, again, like I said, don't realize that I can have emotions attached to that. Like, it's okay to have that grief with that. I taught kindergarten for 7 years, and I think of like mamas dropping their kindergartner off to school, and no matter if it's the first one or the third one or the fourth one, you know, mom is usually crying. And I would hear parents, moms a lot, like almost invalidating that and just saying like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this is my third one. No, mama, you can cry, that's okay, because that's a big life transition, you know. And we kind of just, even through those little statements, try to make it not as big of a deal as what it is. And it's okay to have emotions. Like you said, not everything needs to be 3 days of crying and mourning, but it's okay to express that emotion, and have that kind of linger for a few days. That's okay. But if we don't give it the time it needs and the time it deserves, it builds up, it becomes a problem, it becomes stuck.
Yeah, I think so many people can relate to what you just said. I mean, I'm thinking of my first child that I dropped off at kindergarten, and I was like, I am not one of those moms who is gonna cry. I got this. And then I dropped her off, and well, actually it happened with all of them, but dropped him off, and then I got in the car and the tears started. I was like, no, I'm strong, and I got over it. But you know, fast forward quite a few years, and we have 2 now that we sent to college. That was a life transition that I was not prepared for as a mother, and you know, maybe some of you listening to this can relate too. And so I think just hearing you gives us permission to pause and to say, yes, those came with some emotions. Let's let them out in a healthy way. I love it. Okay, so if you could tell the world one thing, a piece of advice relating to your content area, what would you say?
I would say that whatever you're dealing with and struggling with, you can come in and get counseling. I think a lot of people think my problem isn't big enough, or there's people with bigger problems than mine, or more problems than mine. If you are feeling like you need somebody to talk to, or are just like unsure of next steps in life, or are feeling stuck, like we talked about earlier, you can reach out to a mental health counselor and just have somebody to be able to talk to. I think it's great for everybody, but I often hear people say like, oh, I wish I would have done this sooner, like I should have done this sooner. You can, like there is no right or wrong reason to come to counseling. And so I always want to get that message out to people, is you don't have to wait for a loss or for a big thing to happen. If there's been a lot going on and you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling stuck, reach out and talk to somebody.
So do we need a doctor's referral for that, or can we make that decision ourselves?
You can make that decision for yourself.
You
have the power to make that decision. No, you do not. You do not need a doctor's referral. You do not need to be on a medication or have a diagnosis. You can come in with anything. It's completely okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to just share a little bit about what you do and your rich background, all of your experiences, and we look forward to hearing more from you.
Sounds great.